Okay. All righty. It's Thursday night, reading 528, and thank you for being here. I have two objectives for our work today. One is to go into more detail and give you some background on this concept of multi-genre paper. And I think it's only appropriate because it's right smack in the middle of our multi-genre readings for this week. And then the second thing is to start working on sharing the load on some of the readings at the end. So I will try to make this concise and direct so that we have more work time for all of us. Okay, so the title is multi-genre, which of course infers multiple different genres of communication. Okay, and I have a question for you to start with. What are the similarities between genre, medium, and mode? Anybody have a thought on that? Anybody have a thought on the difference between expository, expressive, and informational writing? These are some very technical terms. They're language arts terms. And yet these things appear in our TEKS. They appear in our textbooks. They appear in the literature all the time, which is what caused me to think a lot about, especially that second question, which is why I did my dissertation when I was doing my doctoral work on expository writing. Because very often I taught seventh grade for many, many years, and for a long time there was an expository writing exam, which was a very contrived piece of writing. It wasn't true exposition, but nevertheless, it's what the state was asking children to be able to write, as opposed to narrative. Mm-hmm. And yet when I would start exploring and I'd start asking about, well, what is this besides what the state tells you? Nobody could tell me. I'd ask fellow teachers and they'd say, I don't know what expository is. Mm-hmm. So I started digging deep, and I went really deep. And then I studied 2 seventh grade teachers to find out what it is that they did. And that was the result of my research. I'm not going to share all of that with you because that's a much bigger topic, but I'm going to share pieces of insight with you as I move forward.
I always tell my kids that expository writing explained.
Sorry, I'm going to raise the volume. Say that again, please.
I used to tell my kids that expository writing explains.
Yes. Well, I think
narrative writing is more expressive.
Narrative, and yet they both explain, don't they?
They do explain. Both of them do explain.
Are there similarities between an expository and a narrative piece of writing?
I think in that they both explain. Let me think more. They both require some type of craft, writer's craft, to make the point clear. They both have to go through a process. You still have to do editing, revising, so on and so forth with both. That's all I can think of right off the top of my head right now.
Well, I agree with everything you've just said. And what I would tell you is that Tom Newkirk, who is one of my very favorite scholars about writing, would tell you is that all writing is narrative, even expository writing.
Makes sense. Because when you do expository writing, you have to you include your voice.
You have to have your voice. And all writing tells a story.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we are communicating our thinking. We are communicating a point that we want to express. Now, we use different tools to express that. We use different craft mechanisms to express that. We have different audiences to whom we're speaking, and we have different purposes for writing. But at the end of the day, we're informing people about something, whether we might be I've had people say, and it's all persuasive. We're persuading them. Yes, we are persuading them to something that we want to say. Now, it might not have the true, I think there's a whole set of argumentative writing
Yes.
piece
That
tools
falls under
that
expository. Yeah.
they use, like that you teach those in high school where you study the craft of argumentation, but we don't necessarily do that in the younger grades. But we do teach the difference between informational writing and storytelling as two separate things. Because when we think of narrative writing, we think of it as, oh, it's a story about me and my life.
Right.
It's
A
closer
small
to
moment.
memoir,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And it usually has some form of a generalization at the end or a lesson somewhere. Well, there's a very tight knit between expository and expressive, but I think that you hit it on the head. You got it, whatever that term was. When you think about expository, the simplest term is that it explains. It explains your thinking, your journey about a topic, as opposed to telling about a moment in time.
Mhm.
That's what my whole first chapter in my dissertation, because I had to discover that. I had to read all the way back to the beginning to figure out, well, where in the heck did this thing come from? And why do we have it? And why isn't it? And we don't even use the term anymore.
Mm-mm.
I always look
Don't
at
use
it as,
expository anymore.
but we do use it in reading teaks. You'll see in the teaks, you'll see
Yes.
find expository devices.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We don't say go write expository
We don't.
anymore.
And then at the end of, like, before they did away with the writing portion of the STAR test, they kind of started wanting kids to marry expository and narrative
Mm-hmm.
because they wanted them to write their expository pieces like kind of like a narrative so that they could have like a storytelling piece when they explain kind of in there, if that
Exactly.
makes sense.
Well, that makes perfect sense. And so what I did was I just jumped a few slides because this is something that came out of my, that came out of my research. And that is this spectrum. I found that expository writing exists across a spectrum of narrative all the way on the left, of pure storytelling, fictitious, or imaginative, stylized storytelling at its purest, to argument where it's very structured and very meant, like you're in a courtroom and I'm going to argue my point. So those are two very different pieces of writing that you can you can teach the craft and the tools for doing that. But in between, there's this sense of exposition or of sharing your thinking all the way across that whole spectrum. So this is how I chose to it's a very blurred background. So Moffitt and Newkirk, they talk about it being a transactional process. It's a transaction between what the author wants to say and the writing tools and the medium by which they are trying to explain it and the information. And it's all blurred boundaries across a spectrum of genres. So you could, if we wanted to, we could start to talk about, well, what are the subgenre for narrative and the subgenre for argument? But I think this is kind of tries to encapsulate this concept. So why is this important to multi-genre? Because what I'm going to ask you to do is one multi-genre expository piece. You're going to explain your thinking and your journey across this course and what you're taking away relative to writing instruction. And I have a slide that gives you very specifics, but I'm glad I see everything. Every time I teach, it's a new rehearsal for me because I never expressed it the way I just said it to you. But that made sense to me. I don't know. Did it make sense to you? You just don't know what it looks like yet. So I will try to explain that. So let me back up now just to give you some context. We just talked about this. Now, when we didn't talk about genre, medium, and mode, but there is a difference. Genre is more of that very specific category. We think of genre as poetry, drama, narrative, a cookbook, or a recipe, a play, a blog post. Those are different genres. Now the medium could be it's blurred again because a medium could be the blog, where you could, in a blog, you could put informational informative, you could put expository, you could put anything on the medium. It's what you're posting it on. And the mode is more of the maybe it's a digital mode, or maybe, well, see, now medium and mode kind of get mixed up. So I'm going to have to look up those terms again, but there is a blurred relationship between these ways of these different styles and ways of portraying information. Okay. But the very technical terms are the genres, and that's the one we use with students. And we talk about, and plural is with an S, and some people mispronounce it and call it genre. It's a French word, and it means kind. Genre means kind or type when it comes from French. Okay, so all of this is tied to the project that I have created and drawn from. I didn't invent it. It comes from these sources that I showed you a book earlier from Tom Romano. These crafted from this book over here called Billy the Collected Works of Billy the Kid. Basically, this Michael Ondate wrote a book in multiple genre about the life of Billy the Kid. He did research on him and told Billy the Kid's story. So teachers, he started it at the collegiate level with his English students. And then that got passed down to classroom teachers. These are like grades 4 through 6 teachers. Melinda Putz, and there's a Camille something rather down here, Camille Allen, who have taken his work and then tailored it to elementary school children. And basically they would take a topic and they would teach this, of course, over an entire semester, where you're studying various different genres and you really get deep to understand, well, what is that genre? What are the rules for poetry? What are the rules of structure for these different types of communication? And then Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher. Penny Kittle, and this is where they describe it, and she teaches high school. And she has a whole unit in here where she talks about how she teaches it over, it's a unit of writing in a writing workshop fashion. So their work is worthwhile looking at. Here's another link that you can look at. And I've already put this presentation in Blackboard if you wanted to be able to go back and reference it. But I just wanted you to know where a lot of this comes from. You can also look at this Weebly, where Tom Romano talks about this concept of being able to do this exploratory writing about a topic and then communicate it through multiple different ways. But the trick is it all has to come together to tell one story. It's not just a collection of pieces that are disjointed, and that's the hard part. So we just talked about expository writing and what it is. It's explanatory writing. I won't read that definition to you, but it's some of the things that I came up with in my research. And it comes from this concept of exploration. Exposition is an exploration or of information, of your ideas and information that you're looking for. You're in seek of knowledge. Montaigne was a French writer who used to write expository writing that were in tomes. They were huge books, but he was very famous for his essays, and they were all expository because all he was doing was sharing his thinking about philosophies of life and all of that sort of thing. And his essays become, I think that's where this term really, comes from way back when. We just talked about it being on a spectrum. And so here's the term here where I define genre is the term for any category of literature or other form of art or entertainment, whether it's spoken, audiovisual, or written, however it is that you want to do that. And these genres form the conventions that change over time as new genre are invented. So think about what you see in literature now from what you saw when you were a kid. You probably didn't have as many picture books that would have a narrative and poetry all in the same book. You see our work is changed. At least I've seen that changed, where we tell we teach children and show children picture books or even pieces of, I'm trying to think of Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie. Is anybody familiar with that? Oh, it's a great book for sixth graders in that area. Or even I'm thinking Wonder, I'm looking up at my bookshelf right now, but Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie is the story of a boy who has a little brother who is very ill. And so it's his family, his life with his brother. And in it, he incorporates his pieces of writing that he does for his writing teacher. So there's a bunch of different styles of writing. He also has a letter that he's also talking about his journey in middle school. Because I think he's an eighth grader. I did it as a read aloud once. And he's an eighth grader who has a crush on the girl who sits behind him. So he wrote her a love poem. And, of course, imagine what the mind of an eighth grader and the hormones that are racing and all the stuff that they're going through at that age. So you can imagine how cheesy and what this poem, and he's just devastated, that the emotions that a child goes through at that age. So it's a fun book. It's entertaining, and it's his little brother is really small and he has leukemia, and so he's having to go through treatments and all the family dynamics. So it's a good book, but it's got various different styles of writing within it. So I could say that is his story in multi-genre without it being so in your face and explicit that these are different pieces. But it's unified. It tells one story. So the multi-genre research writing came from trying to actually teach, have students go through research to tell the story of a period of time in history, the story of someone's life, etc. But one of the things that I want you to recognize is that it is not an uninterrupted expository monologue nor a seamless narrative. It is composed of many genre and subgenre. Each piece is self-contained, making a point of its own, and yet connected to other pieces by a theme and content, and sometimes repeated language, images, and genre. It may contain many voices, not just the authors. It depends on who's involved in your story. And then, so it has to hang together as a unified whole. Have I confused you yet? Okay, I don't see anybody dropping dead yet. Okay, so here you can read, and there's some links in here where you can explore a little deeper, because I would love to see somebody try this out. Taryn, I'm going to pick on you because I know you work with gifted kids. Your gifted kids would love doing this if you could give them the time to do that. I've done it with lots of mainly middle schoolers, because by the time I discovered it, that's where I was living. I hadn't discovered it when I was working with younger kids. So your purpose is to choose your audience and to persuade a body of readers about the importance of your topic. In this case, it's writing instruction. I'm giving you your topic because that's what this course is all about. When I've done this project with other students in this class, the people did a lot of their own research, and so they picked their topic, but I didn't ask you to go through all of that this time. So you're going to express ideas in multiple genre, even different perspectives. Who are those perspectives? Maybe it's the different stakeholders. Maybe it's something about the perspective of a student, a parent, the teacher, your colleagues, a literacy coach, the principal. But it doesn't have to be all of them. I'm just throwing out ideas. It can be one unified, one voice too. That's your choice. Whoops, excuse me. You're to show relevance and useful information to persuade, assist, illustrate, and document or influence your reader's perspective about your topic. And your peers and I will read your work. I'm going to post it for all of us. Let's skip that slide. So let's look at something more specific. Excuse me, I'm going to close my door because the rescue team is here, and so I'll be right back. Are you coming in? No, okay. Okay, so for purposes of this paper in this class at this time, I'm only asking you to include at least 5 different genre elements. Okay, so you pick your genre, whatever it is that you want, and there's a slide on a whole list of different types of things you could choose from. I'm not limiting you to anything. Okay, to offer insight into the big ideas you want to communicate, but you do need to have a balance of fiction and nonfiction types of genre. Okay. But you also need to have a dear reader letter. So think of this as maybe your book. It's a very small book. Think of it because they all form one concise message. It's a book where your dear reader letter is going to communicate and introduce this book to everyone. What is your purpose for writing? What's your main message? It's the introductory piece. That's all it is. Okay, so I guess in that sense, you're going to have 6 extra pieces because you're going to have the dear reader letter plus 5 different genre. The balance of fiction and nonfiction. Include it within all of this something that is visual or multimodal. That's where your modes come in. It could be images, it could be a video, it could be, however, in the course of your video, I would like to prevent, I discourage you, that's the word I was looking for, of you going out to YouTube and finding somebody else's video. If you have videos of things from your experience or something that you created, or the video could be a dialogue, it could be lots of different things. But this is meant to be your original work as opposed to you collecting other people's work. That's what I'm trying to communicate. It could be a collage, it could be lots of things, but something visual within your collection. And where does all this come from? Use all of the notes. I consider all of the work that you have done up to this point your pre-writing. You have a Padlet full of shared ideas. So if you didn't think of something, but you found an idea within, or you were persuaded by someone, the discussion or some topics of things that others wrote, you can use that information to inform what you want to say. Maybe somebody brought out a point you didn't think about. And you probably took notes on your reading, or maybe you annotated, or maybe something that you submitted. You all did the beliefs about writing instruction, and I said think about a different way that you might create it. You can use the one that you have, you can amend it to say what you really want to say now, or you can modify it if you want to move that into a different form of communication. That's your choice, up to you. Your collection of these ideas, your beliefs about writing, a profile of a student or ideal literacy classroom. Now, why do I say or? Originally, I had just said it somehow has to communicate your ideal literacy classroom. However, you've probably written an ideal literacy classroom paper somewhere in your history of schooling. It's a common assignment. I've certainly given it in the past. But when you look at presenting your whole work from the perspective of or the profile of a student, you've read lots and lots of pieces, either through research or some other text that you've read, where they give you these little vignettes of a classroom. This is what my classroom looks like. This is X, Y, Z. This is my case study. This is my student. So it helps you focus your piece and make it unifying if you're going to give it maybe around the profile of a student, or maybe this ideal classroom. Advice to a stakeholder. Well, who are your stakeholders? In your case, they're going to be teachers, administrators, parents, students, could be there's lots of different, anyone that would be influenced by the work that you do. And a response or your takeaways from the Literacy Studio book. So you've collected a lot of cool things in the Padlet so far. So as you finish out reading the book, think about what's your response to everything you've read? What are your takeaways? How do you communicate that? So that all of this, the unifying piece is that this is about literacy instruction. You have to decide, well, what is it that I believe most, and what do I want people to know? Who am I talking to? And how can I communicate that? References such as APA 7. So if you're going to reference an article or something, just have a piece at the end that are your references. And when I say unifying elements, remember that somehow these have to be connected. So your introduction is going to be your reader letter. You're going to have to get creative as you think about what's your final piece. How are you going to close it so that this whole piece, everything pulls together at the end? You can use more than 5 genre, but I say 5 to exercise your adeptness at writing and becoming familiar with other forms of writing. I did not include in this course primarily because of time and because you're master's level students. I anticipate that you know what these various genres are. Let me show you. There's a slide in here that has that. And I can't find, there it is. Okay. So here's a few genre ideas like newspaper article, an obituary, editorial, letter to the editor, advice column. I asked you to do advice. Maybe it's a newsletter for parents, a newsletter for your faculty, magazine article, poster, invitation, advertisements, travel brochure. And you can read the list. I don't need to read them all to you, but these are just to get your brain wrapped around different things that you can include to communicate your thoughts about writing instruction. And you have a lot of sources, so you didn't have to go out and do research. The whole course has been a research exploration in some form or another. So far, I'm going to stop right here to let you ask questions or probe my brain, discuss what we've got so far.
So I just want to make sure that I understand clearly. So we need to write in 5 different genres. So say I wanted to choose a newspaper article, but I want to do an interview and maybe include a poem in there or do a personal narrative. Is that kind of the way that we need to be doing it and then kind of marry the worlds, right?
Yes, they all just have to flow together. And they may each do 5 different, they can do different functions because a newspaper, an informative report in a newspaper article is going to be different than what a poem communicates. Could be, that depends on what you're trying to do with it. Maybe an obituary is the death to bad ideas, the death of things that you don't want to see in classrooms anymore, because it's the opposite of what your point is. I'm trying to think. The whole thing doesn't have to, what I want to clarify in what you said is that the whole thing isn't a newspaper article with all of those things inside. Unless you could choose to make a journal that is a themed journal with a different pieces in it. I mean, that would be like nested activities, and that's okay too. A recipe could be a lesson plan, maybe something that comes from your the work that you did for the annotated. I'm sorry, I have 2 courses they're doing an annotated bibliography and you're doing a annotated mentor text. So maybe something from there can enter into this. So I'm trying to allow you to double dip, but to synthesize what you have done in this class and exercise your knowledge of the different genre. And if you don't know what the rules are for these things, you can look those up online. I mean, there's lots of information. So if you need help with that, of course, let me know. You could write a dialogue is an interview, a dialogue with a student or a parent. That's a genre within itself. A dialogue between students about writing. Maybe you're trying to feature an activity in good writing. And that's the peer conferencing, for example, that we did. Because that's such an essential element of teaching. I wanted to feature that as we did the last time that we met.
And then the other question is, do you have like an example of this? Because I'm a visual person.
I know. I thought you might ask. I have some that other classes have done, but this is the first time I've ever done it with this. As I told you, I modified it. I can show you what others have done, but it was a whole different purpose. And so I will try to find one that's good, but they did it around a research question of their own, and they did their own research. So I'll try to give you something more. Now, here's another question that often comes up, and that is, how do you pull this together? I told you at the beginning of the course that this is going to be a blog, because I thought when I have done this, people have posted it on different, I'm trying to think of that dialogue one where you can go in and post things on, but that didn't work out very well, so I didn't go back to that. Basically, you're going to write it any way you want, and then you have to figure out how do you submit this, because you're going to have multiple different pages. So if you want to do a simple Word document or Google document or sites, that's fine with me. A blog allows you to have different pages in different things posted over time, so it's like a journal. You can do that. Wakelet is another platform that is blog-like. There are real blogs that you can, like if you're using Blogger or anything like that, you can. But I'm totally open and don't care how you choose to publish it, but it has to be published to the Padlet in some form or another in order for everyone in the class to, I want at least your peers to see this, apart from me. Does that make sense? Okay. So between now and the end of this course, this is due on the last day of the course. And next week, our topic has to do with differentiating for different populations. I'm going to limit the reading, maybe one article, something, so that because I want you to spend the rest of the course just working on this. And the only other thing is to finish reading the book. I think that there's chapters 5 and 6, or is it maybe 7 and 8 are the last 2 chapters. So that's how we're going to finish out the course. When we meet again next time, we can workshop what you have, so you can bring what you've been working on, bring some pieces, and we can write together. We can confer with each other. You can get ideas. You can bounce ideas off of each other to try and give you more time to be able to work through this. Questions about that? Okay, let's see if there's anything. So I put in here some things about how I score this, and I've just looked through your original thinking, that's your writing, and showing an understanding of the content. You don't have to have the research evidence because I didn't ask you to do research. A sense of creativity, that it's well written and that the genres add depth. So they add depth by what you're communicating and how they flow together. What I want you to recognize is that all these things fit together. It's a complex piece that has to show the structure, that you understand your genre, that there's a sense of energy in your writing, and that you know your topic. You know about writing instruction based on everything that you have read. So you're synthesized. This is like a giant this is your final, being able to pull it together. And what else? We can do some writing now, and we can start practicing with something if you want to. I had a slide here about the benefits of multi-genre, but you can read that on your own. And so you have a choice. Do you want to go ahead and start practicing by writing a piece right now in a little workshop that we can spend the rest of our time together? Or would you like to do one other thing, and that was to go back into D2L? Let's see. We had these pieces that I posted for us to read because they think they exemplify different elements of using genre across the content areas and using multiple genre in your English language arts instruction. So we can, let's see, there's 4 of you in the class right now, and each of you can pair off and choose your articles, and you can start reading it. And then I was going to have you create a whiteboard where you can start to share some of the ideas that you're taking away from the reading right now in class to get started. Or you can work on that, or you can work on some writing towards your multi-genre piece. What are your thoughts? Have you started any of this reading, anyone? Okay. How are you finding it so far?
So far, I've only
I've read through all of it,
Okay.
and it's a
So-
lot. It's good, but there's a lot of it. I feel like for myself, practicing some of the multi-genre might be good, but I'm open to whatever.
Okay. Karen, what are your thoughts on the reading?
I've only had the opportunity to read, I think, Writing to Learn.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had the opportunity to read everything else. I just kind of skimmed everything else today. It might be better to go ahead and try to write maybe in multiple genres.
Okay. So let me ask a quick question. Bess, what were of those four pieces that are posted, which one stands out to you the most? Which one do you think is the most relevant?
Let me go back and look. I thought the Highland article was good because my school is growing from a rural, basically all white school to have a more diverse population.
Mhm.
So they talk about L2 learners, and I feel like even if we weren't so diverse, our regular white kids are more L2 than they used to be, if that makes sense. That's probably not the right way to say it, but just kind of off the cuff. Like they have to be taught what the genres are. And that's what I got a lot out of the Highland article is it used to be that we could assume kids were coming to school with certain things. And I don't think we can assume any of that anymore. So breaking it down into how to explicitly teach what we want our kids to do.
Okay. That makes sense. And I like the way that you said something about the L2 learners. There's a lot of strategies that we do for L2 learners that you can do for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You just, because good teaching is good teaching. You just have to know who you're teaching and what they need in order to figure out, well, what applies to different learners. And I think that the research that we're finding for any, the way that education is turning again in literacy instruction is that we need to bring the explicitness back. And I think that workshopping has always been good. I'm still a big proponent of it, but it's a process and we can't lose what happens though, I believe in time is that programs and processes get co-opted. And when they get co-opted, that means they get destroyed because people don't use them correctly. They don't really understand how it works. Consequently, they get watered down and they're no longer effective. And so therefore, what happens? People start bringing in things and they start scripting it for you because they're saying, well, you don't know what you're doing, so we're going to tell you exactly what to do. And then they don't trust teachers to do the job that they have to do. So there's lots of things that come into that. And then there's people that say, hey, thanks for the script, and others that say, let me just teach. I love, I think Taryn said, just close the door and teach. That you have to trust yourself. And you have to know your stuff. Let me make a comment on the very last one. You can see my name is on that. This is an article that I wrote with Dr. Lowenstein and Dr. Morton. Some of you may have met them in courses. And we wrote this. It's an article where we found after COVID, we were exploring how teachers were teaching writing to elementary kids online during COVID, because we were thought, how do you possibly do that? So we wanted to know. And so then we went back, and that was one study that we did it. And then we went back and said, okay, now that, and it was the end of COVID and everybody was getting ready to go back to their classrooms and doors were going to reopen. So we asked the teachers, so now what are you going to do? What are you taking away from your COVID years? What have you learned and what are you taking away with you? And they overwhelmingly said, we want to bring joy back to the classroom. I mean, it was a dark time for everyone, but learning became even more difficult and more challenging online, and the joy was taken out. And yet our research showed that some kids were able to use that time in their own way to bring joy and curiosity because they could, like a little boy who taught himself how to play the drums. And so that was an example. And so they brought in various different things. So we did an exploration of the literature and said that joy and curiosity are elemental. I mean, they are basic to being able to have a well-structured writing classroom, which is why that diagram that I showed you, it's at the top. It's over here with those different features about, see if I can pull it up. It may not come up right now, but it has the revisioning, the empathy, etc. I have it on my wall. Why I say we need to add joy to that, because that wasn't talked about until we lost it. We just assumed that learning should be joyful. But so that's what that article is about. It shouldn't be too hard to read, and what I would recommend on all of these, because it is a lot, is peruse the articles and pick the parts that apply to you and that make sense. But I felt like you needed to understand the different perspectives. You needed to look at structure, text structure as an element. I wanted you to understand that there is a social response to process. So what does that mean, social response? Any thoughts from anyone? Think about how we learn and what you see in classrooms. Why do we want kids to talk?
Because they learn from each other. They learn from each other. But it also cognitively it forces them to think on a higher level too. It enforces and enhances those critical thinking skills, because you have to listen to somebody, process it, be able to give them feedback, or say, hey, I understand your point because of X, Y, and Z. No, I disagree with your point because of X, Y, and Z. When I first started teaching many, many years ago, I was a second grade classroom, and I had a very old school principal, and he walked into my classroom and he goes, I was teaching second grade, and he goes, do you really think your kids are learning? Because they were talking. And I said, yes, they are. And it was everything that I was learning about teaching, but it wasn't what he thought the ideal classroom should look like. So that was an interesting year, because I was learning things very different from what he expected in his school. So at any rate, and then there's the whole concept of writing to learn instead of learning to write. That's very much a processing sort of thing. So that's the reason for those particular chapters. These are some other, when this gets too heavy, you might jump into these, because these are a little bit lighter. So move in and out and do what you need to be able to get your head wrapped around this. Okay. I don't mean to overwhelm you. If I had stuck to the old-fashioned book that we had before, maybe I wouldn't have had so many articles. So, okay. Let's do some writing. Let me go back. I want you to get something to write with. And I want you to find an image in your head or in your hand. Look around your room, your space, maybe your phone, if you need a picture of something. Maybe it's a person. Maybe it's a student. Maybe you can start thinking about a student. And maybe your student, maybe to that, how many of you, some of you were in my class last semester. And do you remember how Kylene Beers interjected her journey with her one student? She had a 7th grade student, and her whole book was written about her journey and learning to teach that. That was a profile of a student. And throughout her book, she was constantly writing. At this point, when she wrote the book the second time, she was apologizing to the student and saying, I wish I had known at the time why you kept asking me why I can't, how do you say that word? And that she had responded to. So get an image of somebody. A person's probably easiest, but it doesn't have to be. A living thing, a person, a problem, or even a situation.
Now I want you to create a short but detailed character sketch to represent the thing. Maybe it's a member of the sticky situation, the problem you're having with this student. I have the perfect student in mind that gave me heartache after 30 years of teaching and made me work triple time to teach him because he thought that everything I was doing in class was he was triple identified with, what do they call that? He was gifted, he was dyslexic, he was dysgraphic, and he came from a troubled home. And he told me very clearly that what we were doing was stupid and he wasn't going to do any of it. And so I worked with him all year to help him come along, and he did extremely well by the end of the year. So he's someone I've always thought about, how can I write about him? But just take a minute and let's take about 10 minutes to just write your character sketch in any way you want to. And I'll turn the timer on to give us some time. You probably didn't hear that. The timer's just gone on. Would you like a little more time to write, or would you like to come to a stopping point?
So we were just writing about the student, doing a quick like character sketch of the student, right? That was
Yeah.
it.
That's what I did. I just wrote about my student. His name was Dana. So that's what I did. So at this point in time, I forgot to give you this list of questions to answer, but that doesn't matter. I just wanted you to write to have something to start with. Now I want you, so if you, maybe you had a mental picture image instead of an actual photo. And I want you to think about creating a piece of nonfiction to explain something within that, to dig a little bit deeper. Perhaps you'll create an introduction or share a biographical summary to provide background. Maybe take some other aspect as you're going to broaden this, some information around your character sketch that you've created. You'll have to decide. For example, I will explain. I wrote about Dana, and I actually started with a quote that he said. And he said, "This is stupid," he wrote in big letters across the test. And that's all he wrote. Yet it was a benchmark expository writing test, and Dana was a slender 7th grade boy. And then I went in to talk about and describe him and who he was and what I can remember. It's been a long time about this particular boy. But something that I might do is create some context to this with another piece that maybe is a dialogue that I'm having with Dana. That's another genre to expand this sketch or this setting, and or something that where we would have maybe at one of our tutoring sessions to expand that. So that's one option that I might go in. Or maybe it would be, I'm trying to think of something else. I could get into something very specific about what I understand about good writing and why I also going to explain that he was a gamer, and that is one of his talents that he did have that kind of helped him through, because he actually did write stories. He wrote plots, and he wrote stories for the games that he created. But he wasn't able to do that in school. Well, there's a whole line of research about that. So I could start to write about that piece as an informative piece related to Dana's sketch. So think about, before I ask you to think about that, is there anyone else that would like to share a piece of writing, and maybe we can go something they wrote and we can think about different ways to expand it with other genre? While you're thinking, I'm going to open my door because the dog wants to come in. Anyone care to share?
I can share.
Okay.
So I said, Malik came to me as a tiny 4th grader who didn't know how to read. He was, I think, let me try to see. He was actually reading on a 4th grade reading level. It was evident that he was self-conscious and angry about his lack of knowing how to read. Despite this, whenever I pulled him one-on-one in small group instruction, he gave it his all. Immediately, it was evident that he had a learning disability. He would forget what he was taught from one day to the next, so he wasn't retaining anything. I reached out to his mom several times so that we could partner together and come up with a plan to help him. This was to no avail. I ultimately contacted his teacher from his previous district, but she never returned my call. At this point, I knew it was just myself and Malik. We both worked so hard, and after several months, he grew enough to be almost in a 2nd grade reading level. Shortly after, his mom withdrew him from my school without warning. I never got the chance to help him grow more.
Anybody have any thoughts on how she might expand that or transform any of that into another genre? Or add to it?
She could probably make that into like a poem.
Okay.
Sure.
Mm.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, she could maybe write an article about students who like are like withdrew from schools like often and they have to move around a lot. How
So
it
that-
affects them.
It might be a lot to do a whole
Academically.
article, but that would certainly fit. Maybe inserting some statistics or some facts or a chart,
Mm.
some diagram. That would be a good graphical representation of information that supports this problem that you just described. Kids who withdraw because of lack of support, because I would be interested in the dialogue that went on.
That's exactly where I was going with it, with the dialogue, with just pulling him in reading groups, and like literally I would teach him like CVCE and at the beginning. So we'd go over our spiel and we practice, and then he'd read, and then I'd ask him after, and he wouldn't remember it. Like it sometimes would be that quick that he wouldn't remember it. So I'd have to stop and reteach it again.
And so based on that, then I'm wondering, what is the teacher thinking? Maybe the teacher's dialectical journal, not that you kept one and not that any of us have time, but we do it in our heads. The teachers are always reflecting and doing in our heads. And some of us are more organized and actually take physical notes and put things like that into writing. But what, that transaction, I think that even, who's the author of the book that you're reading, she talks about the kind of note-taking that she does on her lesson plans that help her to decide the next best action that she's going to do. So maybe a planning wheel from that perspective. She has a planning wheel. That could be a genre.
Okay.
How you're going to approach him. But I would also encourage you, this is reading, and there's nothing wrong with that because we know that reading and writing are integrated. How is writing going to enter? Because you somehow have to weave in writing instruction. I'm not trying to be a Bugs Bunny here or Elmer Fudd, but how do you weave that into it? So yeah.
That's what I was thinking about, because he struggled. I mean, obviously because he couldn't read, he couldn't write. So I couldn't make out his writing. Like it would be just a jumble of letters.
Okay. So a piece of you can make up a sample. You may or may not have that. So I think once you get going and once you write your first piece, it'll all start to flow as you begin to see. But you have to decide, what am I going to, maybe this centers around your belief statement. Maybe your belief statement is the thing that weaves your entire piece together. So it has to appear maybe as in an entirety, but it also maybe it appears in chapters or sections or pieces across your whole thing. I mean, I think what might be nice when we meet next is if you can have written snippets of just keep writing, just maybe spend a little bit of time writing each day, just adding to even if you just want to outline, what is it that you want to say and what are the different genres you want to dabble in? And then think about what pulls all of this together. What's your beginning and what's your end? And maybe the connecting tissue is I think that it would make sense, your beliefs about writing, because if you're going to put to death in an obituary bad practice or a student ever walking out of your room again, then what are you going to do to change that in your classroom, for example? I'm just making things up. But that's that's the workshopping part, where you guys can help each other if you have some things to bring to the table. And sometimes you just need to talk it through. It's 7:12 and I am happy to keep going or stop according to you, but this is your time and I want to respect your time. If anyone else wants to share and we want to talk it through, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, you are excused. Or you have questions, you let me know. Any other brave souls? I know this is hard. I wish our time were longer so that we could truly do this in a proper workshop style. It's just too short of a time. But I hope you will at least have enough of a taste of this journey to appreciate and revisit how you teach and what you're going to do with students when you go back to visit with them.
Will this PowerPoint be available?
It's on D2L now. Let me make sure that I'm going to show you exactly where it is and make sure that I did what I said I was going to do, or that I said genres and purposes for writing. There it is. Oh, I don't know why I need to look and see what that is all about. But here's the multi-genre course paper. That's what it is there. That will should take you to this presentation. I'm going to post a video of this discussion as soon as I stop recording, and I will move this and our video to the top of the module so you can find it more easily. And I'm happy to go ahead and put that link in the chat box if that makes it any quicker for all of you.
And then Dr. Slay, we still have to do like the multi-genre annotated bibliography for the text that multitask, right?
Yes, you're doing well. Let me clarify. Let me just look, because I'm afraid that I don't want to confuse you with anything. So hold on a second. Let me look into the unit and look at what I posted in D2L. And I just lost. Here's the table of contents. Here's my assignments. Oh, I know what that is. No, that's empty. Let me go back to the syllabus. Because I put the details in a PowerPoint, I thought, and I linked it. So let me just make sure that I am being true to what I wrote and not inventing extra things for you to do. Because that's not my job. That's not my focus. Major assignments. Here we go. Okay, let me share the screen again. I think the only thing that you have to do is the mentor text set and unit overview.
Yes, that's what I meant, the mentor text set.
Okay, good. Because when you said annotated, I thought, oh gosh, did I ask you to annotate something else? And because I did that in another class, but it has a slightly different thing. And I thought, did I get my brain confused? So I wanted to clarify. So yes, you're doing that. And oops, I'm looking for my share button. Here it is. It's under major. I thought I linked this in maybe an announcement or in the description for the module, but I'll double check to make sure I haven't confused myself. But here is the mentor text set and unit overview. If all else fails, it's right under here, under the welcome to this course and major assignments. And that's the one where you're choosing a theme, you're selecting your diverse texts, and you're analyzing them. So in that you are approaching annotation. And then you're doing a slight annotation by describing how you're going to use it, and then you're doing the modified unit overview. That's what you understood before. So this should be what I described before. Okay. And did I give you a deadline on that?
Mm-mm,
I didn't.
not that I've seen.
Okay. How's everybody coming along with that? I think it was supposed to be
Chose
at the end of this module. Go ahead. Sorry.
I chose the 10. I have 10 texts chosen.
So you're in good shape. Okay. Anyone else? You need more time is what I guess of what I'm hearing.
And then I just kind of had a question about the formatting because I remember you showed us several different templates, but can it be like in a table format where we have like the picture of the book, the explanation why we chose it, how we can use it in reading and writing, and then an overview. Maybe the first page can be like the overview of the
Mhm.
unit, and then the second page can be like the table.
Yes, I think that's it. I think a collection of tables would be sufficient to communicate this. Think
Okay.
about it as how would you communicate? What would be useful to other teachers? That's what I want you to think about.
Something
Okay.
that's one page, I can hand it to them and they can look at it and go.
And you may have an explanation or something to
Yeah.
together and all that, and that's narrative. They may or may not read it, but I mean, essentially you could write an article about this, and this is your evidence, and this is all the work that you put together. So I do remember discussing that. I think tables would be perfect. And I gave you choices of tables to be able to put together from the books that you've been reading, because they offer you different ways to organize your units. So again, I'm asking you to think in terms of being a coach and that you're helping others. And so make this useful to your work and those that you influence.
Okay.
I know Elijah's going, yeah, but I teach PE. So I'm not trying to pick on you. And I know Natasha says, but I work with a special population. But I would like to think that you are going to think a little bit larger and bring literacy into your world in writing instruction, because I think it crosses everything. It crosses all of our domains. So thank you for being in this class and stretching yourselves. I appreciate that. Not trying to single anybody out. I'm just thinking about everybody's different perspectives. What else have I forgotten to communicate to you? Let's look at the timing. Let me go back to our.
Oh, when do you want us to turn in the text set?
Well, I think I had planned on you doing it by the end of this module. So next week, by Monday, finish this up by Monday, because. Yep, here's your major assignments. The Padlet discussion, you're all doing great on. You've done the theories and models of writing. You're working on the text set, and then you're going to be doing this. It's not an inquiry blog anymore. It is, but it is your multi-genre. Let's just call it paper.
Okay.
I should call it, since it's a synthesis.
Does it have to be like a certain amount of pages, the paper?
No,
No.
I can't tell you that, because you're going to write your pieces to fit what you want to say. You're the author. You have to decide that. You have to have at least 5. You have to meet the other criteria that I put in the bullet in the PowerPoint. So the multi-genre inquiry blog, the final post or the final piece is due by July 3rd, which is the last day of class. And then the annotated mentor text I put in module 3, so that's due. So let's make that due is Monday. I would like to say Monday, only because that's the end of this module. So that you can focus on the other writing. Because if I extend it to you, if you need an extension, certainly you can ask me for it. But I'm trying to keep you from having to finish everything at the last minute. Is that reasonable? We never did a case study. We didn't do that part. But you certainly have read plenty of research, so I think you got that under your belt. So hopefully my goal was for you to have the research to be able to use towards your qualifying exams, for you to be knowledgeable about how you can talk to other educators and your job to influence others, but also to get some practical elements. And the multi-genre is practical. Your mentor text set is practical. And those are things you can actually use, and you can use as examples with your students and your colleagues. And it gives you things that you can actually apply. And the discussion hopefully helps to enrich all of you. So thank you for engaging in that with each other. Anything else? I know it's a lot, but I hope it's not too overwhelming. That's an oxymoron, I guess. I'm sorry. Tell me what you need. Or if you're thinking about it during the week, you let me know what you need.
Just examples of, I guess, even if it wasn't exactly how we're doing it, it would just be good to have an example as a visual, just to kind of see where to go.
Got it. I'll get that for you. No problem. That's it. All righty then. Well, I hope you have a good evening. As I say, enjoy the learning journey. It's a journey. All right, tell me, don't be afraid to reach out as you're moving along. Okay. These deadlines work for you? Elijah's got a question.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The annotated mentor text, could you give me an example of like what we're supposed to do for that assignment?
Yes. I have a feeling you may be questioning because this was presented in a PowerPoint early in the semester. And I'm not sure. Let me see. Let me go backwards and see if I can find where that presentation is. Let's look up here first. Let me see if I put here. Okay, well, here's you're gonna read the assignment, but apart from that, I'm gonna try to pull up these books. This book, Elijah, is one of the books that I put in the syllabus. It's available in the library. It's digitally. So, oh, you got it. Good for you. And so it gives you lots of different types of texts and ways you can approach using a mentor text to teach writing. Okay, so you're going to choose, how many did I say? 10 texts? Yes, you're going to choose a theme. I chose, when I did my work a while back, I chose the theme of immigration. You might choose something related to PE, and that's okay, because that's a content area. Taryn, I think, was thinking of doing something with diversity and equity. What did you land on?
I landed on racial diversity and
Okay.
kind of like a advocating
Mm-hmm.
for other races type thing, because
Okay.
that's mostly what my 10 books are about.
Best, would you care to share where you're leaning?
We are a Capturing Kids' Hearts school. So I was thinking of choosing one of our monthly focus words, like character traits.
Mm-hmm.
And we have lots of new kindergarten and first grade teachers this year. So I was kind of gearing it towards younger kiddos and helping them to understand, what does integrity mean, or what does perseverance mean?
Nice. Okay. Natasha, what have you been thinking about?
Honestly, I haven't really thought about it,
Okay.
but I will figure it out.
Okay, you haven't picked a theme yet. So you're gonna pick a
Maybe
theme.
like community and I guess I'm
Could be.
really not sure.
Dyslexia.
I know, but I always do stuff on dyslexia.
It could be kids with special needs or kids,
Yeah.
a book that comes to mind that you could center everything. Have you ever read Thank You, Mr. Fokker?
Mm-mm.
Oh, good one. Get it.
I'll be right back.
Get it.
You guys talk.
You need
I'll
it
be
like for
right
your
back.
personal like office. Get it. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Falker. You could do You Matter. You could do All Are Welcome, because that's about kids with disabilities. All Are Welcome. There's another one. I look at it every time I go in her office and I can't remember for the life of me what it is, but it's about, I know you said you didn't want to do dyslexia, but every time I go into my dyslexia therapist's office, like I guess she does it as a read aloud with her kids, but there's a book that she has about a little girl who has dyslexia.
And I actually have 2 books because 2 of our dyslexia interventionists, they wrote books about students with dyslexia. So I guess I could do students with disabilities, but
I can help you with that. I can just shoot you like titles of books if you want me to.
yes, that'll be great. Thank you.
I'm looking for the book. I used that book other times and I'm so sorry. I
Get
can't.
Thank You, Mr. Falker, for sure. That should be one of yours, for
And
sure.
it's thank you. And I think I want to say it's a Patricia Polacco book.
It is. It's Patricia Polacco.
Okay, and it's thank you, Mr. Falker. Mr. Falker is the teacher in the story. But you will like I know you'll love the book.
Hold on. I think I've read that book before.
It's a book about a girl with a child with, and Patricia, all her books are biographical in some form or another. And so I think she suffered from dyslexia.
She did.
I think I actually have the
So
I think I actually
anyway,
have the book. I just hadn't read it.
and sometimes you can take one book that you really like and you center everything else around it, and everything grows from that particular text when you're building your text sets. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So as far as choosing a theme, is that helpful, Elijah? Give you some ideas?
It does give me like some ideas. I could think of like PE or I don't know, maybe.
I just thought of something. I don't know, Willie Mays just died. Well, he was one of my childhood heroes, and I actually met him when I was a kid. My parents had a picture where all the family, everybody was with him to say, "Hey, kid," and he was a hero. He broke some barriers. He was a man who made a difference in the world. And so I was just thinking about heroes in sports or sport, anything. Because you're PE, I'm making the assumption that you would want to do something related to PE, but that's not necessarily true. So I'm
So
making assumptions.
is it kind of like just collecting? So, because sometimes things they go over my head. Is it kind of like just collecting books or seeing if something ties into that theme? Is that
Well,
what
you're
we're
going
looking at?
to create, you are making a collection. You don't have to physically buy them, but you have to identify 10 books that showcase different perspectives and writing styles and genre. So you're gonna have to do you have to sit down, go find yourself a spot in a library, a bookstore, or on some online websites, and start thinking about children's books that address that you can use to teach a theme. Now, because is a course about writing instruction, you understand that writing comes from various there's different genres, so maybe one of your books or maybe one of your pieces is going to be a poem about something related. Oh, here's a book for you. Hold on. I've got to come back. I got another one. If you're doing something with sports, let me see if I can find it now. Why are books not where I want them? It's not this one. Oh, there's a book and it's got Muhammad Ali on it, and it's a poetry book. And for some reason, I want to say it was written by Kwame Alexander. I was thinking of this one, but I think there's another one, but it's all these sports heroes and it's all these and something about who's the greatest, and what Muhammad Ali was known for, the boxing champ. So, but it's a book, it's all poems. So that would be one book you might include. Because you want to be able to teach your children, your students, how your theme can be communicated across different writing styles and genre. When I say also consider when and how to use paired text. So when you pair a text, you might have a picture book on Muhammad Ali, and then you might have another one that's a poem about Muhammad Ali. So you can put two different styles of text together to communicate a particular idea. I'm reading the assignment again to help you work through that. You need to include at least 5 different genres, or 5. So you might have to have something that's informative, something that's a poem, something that's a play, something that's a story about an athlete, if you're going to go that way, which would be your narrative or a memoir type of thing. You're going to analyze the mentor texts. And when we call them mentor texts, it's because they're examples of writing that you use to teach a structure in writing. If you're teaching kids how to write or think about something, you have to give them the visually. You help them tease that. That's why it's a mentor text. And this book will help you understand that concept. And I think that she also refers to it in this Literacy Studio book that you've been reading. Okay. So you're going to create a chart, and the chart's going to have the title of the book, how it was, who published the book, who's the author, and then you're going to have a description of what this book is about. What is the content of the book, and how will you use it for instruction? So it says, analyze the mentor text with a critical eye for content and instructional use. Identify the key literary elements, the writing techniques and thematic elements that are present in the text. So how does it fit your theme? Is this a good piece to teach character development? Is it a good piece to teach poetry style, et cetera, et cetera? If you need help with any of this, because you may not be familiar with the language arts TEKS, let us know. Identify this learning standards. So you're going to have to go visit your TEKS, and there's all of that's on the TEA website. And the writing, you're going to identify the TEKS and the writing assignments you would recommend teachers use when you connect these texts together. Does that make sense so far?
That makes sense.
Okay. I know it sounds like a lot, and it's probably a little overwhelming at this point, but your content area, if you think about in cross-curricular or other content areas, writing and reading lessons. So very often when you're not sure what to do, I often will go to science, math, the content areas, go PE in your case. So pick a subject that kids have to learn about. You could do a whole text set on math, a whole text set on like character traits would be, that's something that's going to touch upon the SEL environment, something. There's lots of ways you can go with it. I picked immigration because it was something that was near and dear to my heart when I did it many years ago. So you're going to develop a modified unit overview describing how you will use these mentor texts, both incorporating reading and writing. And that's where this book, both of these texts talk about double dipping, making sure that you can teach with a book. So if you were going to use this book of poems, how would you teach reading with it, and you would teach writing elements? So, and sometimes you only pick pieces of it. You can't use the whole book, but you use enough that those are examples to give your students for your writing instruction. I'm not asking you to write lesson plans. I'm just asking you to think of an overview on how that would work. And I think that, sorry, I think it was in this book that there's some charts at the end of the book that I highlighted earlier that you can use to show how these mentor texts, how unit planning can go. And I think I showed earlier that you go to the web, there's a companion website that the publisher provides for you to be able to download some templates. And then you can modify those to your use. But you can get some ideas on how to shape this in a way so if you think about filling out a chart, it's more useful than writing a long narrative display. It's not an essay, other than you're going to pull it together and explain what you've got, an introduction. So it says, consider using a template from Mentor Text that multitask. So let me make sure that we know that's a book. Your presentation is an introductory narrative presenting the goals and use for the text set. So that's a half a page of writing, whatever it takes to introduce what you've got. You're going to have a table with the text and the image and the bibliographic information, and a unit planning overview table. So one's a list of the books in a table format, because I think that's easiest. And then the other one's a unit planning in a table. It makes most sense. And here's the resources that you can use. Any questions? I mean, does that help a little bit?
Yes.
As you're going along, any of you, if you want to say, hey, Dr. Slide, can you look at this? Is this working? I'm happy to look at it. Feel free to buddy up as you need to make this work for all of you.
Natasha, I sent you directly a couple of books in the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go from there.
Fable's Dream is a good one.
Would you like me to leave this open for any of you to be able to continue to talk to each other?